Oh no, they're raising the taxes again. This is socialism, say the Americans. And of course, the people enlightened by the academia will say, no, you are uneducated. Socialism is when the government controls the means of production. What the government just wants is to give you free healthcare. So what is the truth within this conversation? Why do Americans consider that raising taxes is socialism? And I believe that they look at other nations in the world, like Zimbabwe or North Korea, and they notice that in these nations you have a small group of elites that have a disproportional amount of power and control over their populations. So while the people in Zimbabwe are incredibly poor and they're struggling to make ends meet from day to day, the people in power are obscenely wealthy to the point that even some American politicians would look at their wealth with envy. Just so you can understand, one of the kids from one of these politicians has an actual Batmobile in Zimbabwe. Actual Batmobile. Like, that's how wealthy their parents are. So when you look at these nations and you consider them to be failed states, in reality, they are working as intended. The people in power get all the wealth from those states, and the rest of the people starve. Now, what these states have in common is that in their past, there was a socialist revolution. Someone came up and promised that if they are in power, if they are elected, they are going to provide equality, and everyone is going to benefit. However, once they got in power, they did not follow up on that promise. So this is why people associate socialism with the government raising taxes. Because in order for these revolutions to happen, you need to weaken the population to such a degree where they cannot fight back. And I have found this very interesting newspaper. I don't know where it's from, but probably not from Alinsky, like the people on Twitter are claiming. It did go viral, and the reason that I want to talk about it is that I find all of these 8 points to be very accurate, and I also like the phrase useful idiots. So the phrase useful idiots is attributed to Lenin. I'm not sure whether or not Lenin actually said it, but in a socialist revolution, like for example with Lenin, in order for him and his friends to have all the wealth and to have all the power and control in Soviet Russia, what he needed was for a huge chunk of the population who wasn't going to have the wealth and they weren't going to have the power to side with Lenin. And these are the useful idiots because they were fighting in the revolution thinking they're going to get a better life, but in reality they were fighting so that Lenin and his friends can get a better life. Them, not so much. So this is the useful idiots. And the 8 bullet points is how do you create a nation that's weak enough in order to be taken over by the socialist revolution. And all of these points are very accurate. If you look at the history of countries that had socialism, they implemented every single one of them. So, for example, the most important one I would say is poverty. Increase the poverty level as high as possible. Poor people are easier to control and will not fight back if you are providing everything for them to live. So this is actually attributed to Lenin when he said that you need to grind the middle class between inflation and taxation. In other words, destroy the middle class, because the middle class are the people that are able to fight back. They already have a lot to lose. Like, they notice that their lives are becoming worse. They're more influential. For example, a doctor is very influential because he can talk with a lot of patients. He can spread his ideas to a bigger number of people. A person in the media is also middle class. He can also use his influence. So the middle class is highly problematic, and the way you get rid of them is through inflation, taxation, bring them down to the level of poverty. And once you do that, you use welfare. Take control of every aspect of their lives: food, housing, and income. In other words, people are less likely to rise up, even to protest, if they know they risk losing their housing, if they know they risk ending up on the street. You don't even need jails at that point. If you convince the people that you have the power to take away their homes, This is something that happened in my country under socialism. People didn't actually own their houses. They rented them from the state. So really, at any point, the government could just take away your house because you didn't own it. And there's a nice fable involving Stalin that was very popular in my country. It involves Stalin taking a chicken and plucking it alive. And everyone is horrified as they see the dictator just pulling out the feathers from this living animal. There's blood everywhere, but no one has the courage to tell Stalin to stop. So they all witness this macabre gesture as the dictator just hurts this animal and then lets it go. What he does next is even more interesting. He gets a handful of corn and starts leading the chicken through the room, and the chicken follows. It's still covered with blood, but it just follows around and pecks the corn. So the moral of the story is that regardless how much you hurt someone, regardless how much you torture someone, as long as you are the only method of that person having food, and you are the hand that feeds that person, they will follow you around no matter what. So this is why welfare is very important, right? You impoverish people, then you give them welfare. What this does is that it causes debt in your nation. But once you have the debt, you can increase the taxes. Because you can tell people, it's like, well, we have debt. All of you are on welfare. So the only thing for us left to do is to increase the taxes. Right? So all of this poverty is organized. It is planned. When people say that leftists have higher IQ and they're intelligent, it's because they are. The people in power are benefiting from this. Like, this is what they want to accomplish, and they can accomplish it because, again, look at Zimbabwe or North Korea. The people in power, they have plenty. Their system benefits them. It's the other people who don't benefit from the system. Gun control. This is also very important. I don't think there's any authoritarian nation out there which allows their population to be armed. And I don't think most people even understand why this is, because people usually have like this romanticized version of standing up to the government. Like, you have the rebels over here and you have the military over here and they're battling it out. That's not what it means, okay? What it does mean is that when the government, for example, wants to take away your stuff, it happened in my country. It was called nationalization. They went from farm to farm, confiscating grain and confiscating farm animals. If the people were armed, no one in their right mind would execute that order. Because when you take someone's grain and when you take someone's cattle, you're basically taking their ability to feed themselves and their family. Like, you're sentencing them to starvation. At which point, that person has nothing left to lose. So the person executing the order can probably go to 5 different farms and do it, but then he ends up at the 6th farm where there's a crazy guy with a gun that goes like, get off my lawn. And the apparatchik, which is there to confiscate the cattle and the grain, also has a family at home, probably has a couple of colleagues from which he heard what happened to them when they refused to follow the instructions of the crazy man with the gun. So they will probably not follow the order. Of course, the government can have like a military force that goes from farm to farm confiscating, but that would be incredibly expensive. The government does see you like an all-powerful deity, but in reality it also functions on money, so it can't just waste resources like that. So this is why gun control is very important to create an authoritative state. You can't do it without it. Romania used to have a Second Amendment. The first thing that the communists did when they came in power is they took away people's guns. And furthermore, you may not notice the benefit of having an armed population because it's not so direct, but take into account that in order to fight the pandemic, the measures that were done in China would have never been able to be implemented in the United States. Because the people in the US have guns. Simple as. You can't just go in the US and tell people, hey, you're not allowed to leave your apartment building. Ever. You know, until we say, no, like they would just come out with a gun and be like, get the fuck out of my way. I need food. I need to eat. All right? Just fuck off. That's how it would have happened in the US. In China, they can't do that. Same thing like Australia versus US. Look at the measures implemented in Australia versus the United States. Right? And you can even look in the US at the states which have stronger gun regulations and the measures that the government did to keep people safe versus the ones that are red states, like Florida. And you can notice the startling difference, right? In other words, the politicians don't have the balls to impose authoritarian measures to a population that is armed. Simple as. Then you have healthcare, control healthcare, and you control the people. I mean, again, if you can't get pills when you get sick, if all your healthcare is dependent on the welfare, you know, if your grandma is sick and she needs medicine, but the government will take it away from her if you go and protest, yeah. And then there's a lot of other things, even in democratic nations, that there's some emergency orders that can be activated only in a healthcare emergency. So, yes, like controlling public healthcare is important, right? This is why you don't want private healthcare. You want public. Like, everything needs to be controlled by the state. Religion. The problem with religion is that it gives people a different set of morality that doesn't come directly from the state. So it's all about control. The government is the one that's going to tell you what to think. And of course, you have the class warfare. This is also very important. It doesn't have to be class warfare. It can be a struggle based on gender or ethnicity, race, age. It doesn't really matter. The whole point is to put people against each other in order for them not to look up at the politicians and to fight amongst each other. So you tell the people that everything bad happening to you right now, the fact that you can't get a job, the fact that there's a high crime rate, the fact that you are now more poor than you used to be, or that your parents used to be, is due to the fact of the other. All right? So if only we could get the other to stop oppressing you, then things will be good. But the reality is just to create bread and circus for the masses, right? This is the Chinese cultural revolution, if you will. So all of these things are to weaken the average citizen, to make him unable to take care of himself, to make him reliant on the government, to turn the government into daddy. This is why it's called the nanny state. And this is why Americans always freak out when the taxes are being raised, because they're already very high in the United States. And when you keep raising the taxes and you add inflation over that, well, you're destroying the middle class. In other words, they're taking away the ability of people to resist against tyranny. And of course, it's happening step by step. It's not happening overnight. And this is why the average American considers, oh my God, they're raising taxes. That's socialism. Let me know what you guys think, though, and I will see you in the comment section. Take care.